One of the weirdest videos that I have done on my channel that has honestly done pretty well was the video I made about a year ago in my family's traveling vehicle when we were on vacation and when I didn't have my microphone set up with me. This was a video talking about a very big trade rumor that happened in May of 2019 involving the Vancouver Canucks, well actually no, it was a lot of other teams, and the Minnesota Wild. You already know what we're talking about here from looking at the title and the thumbnail, but I wanted to revisit the Jason Zucker and Brock Boeser trade rumors that presented itself a year ago. Yes, I made a video about this. It was a car vlog, Clay Emu style. It was one take, and videos that I make aren't usually one take. They usually take quite a few more takes than that. But that was one of the rare instances where a full video comes out in one shot from my mouth over here. But I wanted to revisit that topic here today because taking a look at things with the idea of 1 year later is very, very interesting, especially with the idea of what actually happened with Jason Zucker and how he got traded and what the return was there. So, if you were living under a rock in 2019 May, you would not have known about this trade rumor, but it was something that the majority of Canucks fans and media were all talking about. Because Michael Russo, who is a beat reporter for the Minnesota Wild, he talks about them, he writes about them for The Athletic, and he knows all his stuff about the team. He went on to Minnesota radio in May of last year, and he had a little hit where he talked about different trade scenarios for Jason Zucker that then Wild GM Paul Fenton was trying to get done. This is Account for Hockey, James on Twitter, who actually tweeted about what Michael Russo said. This is the tweet that he says over here. Michael Russo on Minnesota radio says that Jason Zucker had been shopped to the Calgary Flames in exchange for Michael Frolik and Sam Bennett, Pittsburgh for Phil Kessel, Arizona for Christian Dvorak, which was turned down and which the Coyotes ended up countering with Fisher, Vegas for Jonathan Marchessault, and the Vancouver Canucks for Brock Boeser. To which the Vancouver Canucks laughed and hung up. Now that's interesting. And it was so interesting that a lot of people were harping on the Minnesota Wild immediately after this trade rumor came out. I remember the big reaction from Canucks fans was, what does Fenton think he's doing? Is he crazy? Getting rid of Jason Zucker for Brock Boeser? You think you could get that done? Really? And that's kind of the reaction that I saw a lot of Canucks fans kind of pointing in the fingers of Paul Fenton, because a lot of Canucks fans thought that Jason Zucker was a guy that was not really all too valuable and that Brock Boeser had potential over the moon. So you could see kind of why Canucks fans didn't really like that idea and were kind of laughing along with the idea. But I will say though, in the video that I made about it a year ago, where I was just sitting in the car, I actually kind of did defend Zucker, and I did say that he was a very good play-driving two-way forward for the Minnesota Wild, one of the best on the team in that aspect. Sure, I said that he wasn't as valuable as a Brock Boeser, but all the people that were laughing at this trade, they weren't really giving Zucker the credit he deserved. And I think we kind of got that with what eventually transpired a few months down the line when Zucker actually was traded. But before we get to that, I want to revisit the points that I made in the video a year ago, where I said that Paul Fenton wasn't really being super consistent with these trade offers. Because on one hand, it's one thing to ask for Brock Boeser in return for your Jason Zucker, your mid-20s winger who can put upwards of 40 to 50, 60 points in one season and drive the play well at both ends of the ice. It's one thing to ask for Brock Boeser for that guy, and it's another thing to ask for Christian Dvorak. Out of all these players on this list over here, it's very notable that all of these guys have differing levels of value. Dvorak, yes, he is a good player for the Coyotes, and he is going to get better as his career goes on, but to put him at the same level as Phil Kessel and Brock Boeser is just kind of weird in my opinion. Honestly, taking a look at it, I'm not really that surprised that the Coyotes rebutted with a Fisher instead of Dvorak in that trade offer, because the way Dvorak is playing right now, he's pretty much what Jason Zucker was when he was Dvorak's age, and I can definitely see good things coming out of Dvorak, but even the other offers over here, the two players from Calgary, Jonathan Marchessault, like, what are you doing? That's a potential 60-point player right there. And Jason Zucker is a guy who was coming off of 30 goals the previous year, 64 points, and who had other values to his game aside from the point production. Sure, Zucker had a bad year last year, and that's kind of part of why Canucks fans were laughing at this trade proposal, but at the same time, he is a good NHL player. And he's somebody that I always defined as a good NHL player. So when he did eventually get traded to Pittsburgh, and no, it was not for Phil Kessel, I was very, very shocked to see what exactly the Penguins gave up. The trade went like this. Jason Zucker to the Penguins in exchange for Alex Galchenyuk, Calen Addison, and a conditional 2020 first. Yeah, a first. A first, Galchenyuk, and Calen Addison is enough to get you Zucker? Are you kidding me? Now that that has been put into place, I think it's kinda understandable why Paul Fenton was asking for Brock Boeser in the Zucker trade proposals with Vancouver. Sure, it doesn't justify the Dvorak thing. In fact, it makes the Dvorak thing even worse in my opinion. But if Jason Zucker was legitimately able to fetch yourself a really solid top 4 defenseman prospect, a conditional first-round pick, and Alex Galchenyuk, my goodness, this guy was valued much higher by Jim Rutherford than I thought anybody had the potential to. You could say what you want about Alex Galchenyuk, oh, the guy's a bust, oh, the guy's this, the guy's that. But at the end of the day, he's still a middle 6, top 9 quality NHL player. Like, that's not too bad. Especially compiled with a first-round pick, albeit conditional. And Calen Addison? Oh man, I thought that Calen Addison was one of those draft steals that the Penguins were able to get in the second round of 2018's entry draft. And they traded this guy in a package for Zucker? Oh man, that's crazy. So, with this in mind, one may beg the question, if Pittsburgh gave up this much for Zucker, would the Canucks have been able to get away with just a 1-for-1 with Boeser? Would they have needed to add draft picks too? Because Galchenyuk and Addison have some form of value, but the first on top of that, boy oh boy. Brock Boeser is a guy who, especially nowadays, isn't really seen as the same kind of player as he was back when he was sniping goals left and right and finishing second in the Calder race. So who knows if Paul Fenton at the time kind of saw that and said, hey, you know, send this player to us, we'll give you Jason Zucker. That seems like an equal set of value, right, Jim Benning? But of course, I will give props to Benning and Co. for just sticking with Boeser and apparently laughing and hanging up, according to Michael Russo. It's just interesting to me, especially because of all the other offers that were made. Again, that Dvorak thing really weirds me out. Marchessault is a good player. Phil Kessel is, well, you could say what you want about Phil Kessel. And Christian Dvorak is not really something that I would put at the same level as a Brock Boeser. If the Coyotes were willing to trade away a Dvorak then in my opinion, they would have needed to add so much more than what the Penguins were able to give up. Seriously. Given 2 firsts and maybe a prospect and another late draft pick or something, I'm not sure. Because Jason Zucker's trade value is something that I didn't realize was as high as it actually was. And with this information available to us now, where he's worth Calen Addison, Alex Galchenyuk, and a conditional 4th, it makes sense why Brock Boeser was on the table. Now sure, I do agree that Boeser is more valuable than all the trade packages we have talked about here today, but still, it's a lot more of a realistic scenario and a realistic idea nowadays, especially since we know what he actually costs, compared to when we made that video 1 year ago. So, comment down below what you think about Jason Zucker. I know not a lot of people are too familiar with this player, but I certainly am, and I certainly like what he has to bring on the ice. Comment down below what you think about that and the trade discussion with Brock Boeser. I hope you enjoyed this video. So 99, and bye.